Airport employees humiliated and kicked Sasha Obama out, but everything changed when her father showed up. Subscribe and write in the comments where you're watching us from. The sun had barely risen over Washington, D.C., painting the early morning sky in hues of orange and pink. Sasha Obama, 21 years old and determined to carve out her identity apart from her famous family, adjusted her backpack and glanced at the time on her phone. It was just past 6:30 a.m., and she was on her way to catch a flight to New York City. She had been invited to present her research at a prestigious youth conference, a chance to share her voice and ideas with other bright young minds. She felt a mix of excitement and nerves, her thoughts a swirl of rehearsed lines and potential questions from the audience. Her father's pep talk still echoed in her mind. You're there because of your work, your dedication. Nobody can take that from you. She appreciated his words, but the weight of her last name was hard to shake. As she stepped into the busy terminal at Reagan National Airport, the noise of early morning travelers surrounded her. Announcements blared, voices hummed, and the scent of coffee mixed with the faint smell of jet fuel. Sasha weaved through the crowd, her slim frame allowing her to move swiftly. She reached the check-in counter, where she handed over her ticket and ID. The woman behind the desk barely looked up. "Good morning," Sasha said, her tone polite but direct. The woman, M.M. Reynolds, glanced up, her eyes scanning Sasha's face, and then her documents. "Flying to New York?" "Yes." "Business class?" Reynolds raised an eyebrow, inspecting the ticket as if looking for a flaw. The pause stretched longer than necessary. "Are you sure this is your ticket?" she asked, voice laced with doubt. Sasha blinked, surprised. "Is there a problem?" Reynolds hesitated, her lips tightening. "We don't usually see passengers like." She cut herself off, her face flushing. "Never mind. Just making sure everything's in order." Sasha's irritation flared, but she shook it off. Yet when Reynolds whispered to another agent, pointing toward her, that small spark of anger grew into a flame. The second agent, a man with a stern look, eyed Sasha's ID carefully. "This ticket is for business class," he said, his tone skeptical. "I know," Sasha replied, steady but firm. "It's my ticket." He exchanged a glance with Reynolds and then waved her through. "Fine. Go ahead." Sasha grabbed her belongings, feeling the eyes of other passengers on her as she moved toward security. Her father's words echoed, "Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are." She took a breath and steeled herself. The security line was long but moving. Sasha placed her bag on the conveyor and walked through the metal detector. As she reached for her bag, a TSA agent stepped in her way. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said. "We need to perform a secondary screening." Sasha frowned. "Why? Is there a problem?" "It's a random check," the agent replied, though his tone suggested otherwise, directing her to a separate area. Frustration grew as the random check turned into an invasive pat-down and a thorough search of her bag. "Who bought your ticket?" the agent asked. "I did," Sasha snapped. "For a conference." The agent smirked. "Fancy conference if you're flying business class." Sasha bit back her anger, knowing it was better not to escalate things. When he finally finished, he handed her belongings back, muttering, "You're good to go." As she returned to the terminal, her composure shaken but intact, she checked her watch and hurried toward her gate. But just before she arrived, a cluster of airline staff whispered and pointed at her. A middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense air approached. "Miss, I need to see your ticket and ID again," the woman said flatly. Sasha handed over her documents, frustration mounting. The woman inspected them and said, "We've been informed there may be an issue with your ticket. Please come with me." "What kind of issue?" Sasha demanded. "Routine verification," the woman replied, already walking toward a side corridor. "This way." Sasha hesitated but followed, her heart pounding as they moved away from the gate area. The woman stopped and turned. "I'm sorry, but we can't let you board. You need to leave the airport." Sasha stared, stunned. "Why?" "We have our reasons," the woman shrugged. "If you don't leave willingly, security will escort you out." Fury surged through Sasha. She clenched her fists, her mind racing. Fighting back tears, she pulled out her phone. "Dad," she said, voice trembling, "I need you." The call ended with his calm reply, "I'm on my way." Standing in the quiet corridor, Sasha's mind raced. She was stranded with less than 45 minutes until her flight left. Clutching her bag tightly, she felt the humiliation burn as she considered her next move. Her instincts screamed to return to the terminal, but she hesitated, uncertain of what might happen if she did. Her phone buzzed in her hand, a text from her father. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Stay where you are." Sasha exhaled shakily. The assurance helped steady her nerves, but the sting of indignation remained fresh. Why had she been singled out? She replayed the morning's events in her head, the faces of the TSA agents, the airline staff, the whispers and pointed fingers. It wasn't hard to see the pattern. She'd grown up recognizing the quiet, insidious ways people let their prejudices slip into their actions. But this was different. This was blatant. As her thoughts spiraled, the sound of approaching footsteps jolted her. 2 TSA agents appeared, one male and one female, both with stiff postures and stern expressions. The man held a clipboard, his grip tight, as if it were a shield, while the woman carried a handheld scanner. "Ma'am, we need to conduct an additional screening," the man said, his tone clipped and devoid of empathy. "Please place your bag on the table." Sasha's jaw tightened. "I've already been screened twice," she replied, her voice firm but not raised. She had learned from her parents the power of composure, even in the face of blatant injustice. The woman's expression didn't waver. "This is a random check, ma'am. Compliance is mandatory." Sasha stared at them for a moment, then reluctantly placed her bag on the table. She watched as they unzipped it and began rummaging through her belongings with little regard for their order. They pulled out her laptop, flipping it open as though searching for hidden compartments. Her toiletries bag was dumped out, the contents spilling onto the table in a messy heap. "Is this really necessary?" Sasha asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her effort to remain calm. The male agent ignored her question, holding up a book she had packed. "What's this about?" he asked, his tone almost accusatory. "It's a book for the conference I'm attending," Sasha replied, her patience thinning. He squinted at the cover as if it were written in an alien language, then tossed it aside. The woman ran the handheld scanner over her laptop, her movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring the power she held in this moment. Sasha glanced around, hoping to catch the eye of someone who might intervene, but the corridor was still deserted. Her isolation made the situation feel even more oppressive. After several minutes of invasive inspection, the agent stepped back. "We'll need to hold on to your bag for further analysis," the man said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "What? No!" Sasha protested, stepping forward instinctively. "You can't just take my things. I have a flight to catch." The woman's gaze hardened. "Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, we'll have to escalate this matter." "Escalate? You've already humiliated me in front of everyone at security, and now you're trying to steal my things? This is harassment." Her words seemed to echo in the empty corridor. The agents exchanged a look, their expressions unreadable, before the man stepped forward. "You need to calm down," he said, his tone laced with condescension. "We're just doing our job." Sasha took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She knew she couldn't let her emotions take control. Not here, not now. "I'm not going anywhere without my bag," she said, her voice quieter but no less firm. The male agent opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a new figure appeared at the end of the corridor. It was the manager who had confronted her earlier, flanked by 2 security guards. Their presence made the already suffocating space feel even smaller. "What's going on here?" the manager demanded, her sharp voice cutting through the tension. The female agent straightened. "We're conducting a secondary screening. She's refusing to comply." "That's not true," Sasha interjected, her frustration boiling over. "I've complied with everything you've asked, and now they're trying to take my bag for no reason." The manager's eyes narrowed as she looked Sasha up and down. "This is becoming a disruption, miss. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the airport." The words hit Sasha hard. "You can't be serious." "Yes," the manager whispered. "We have the right to deny service to anyone who poses a potential security risk." "A security risk?" Sasha's voice was incredulous. You're calling me a security risk because of how I look? The silence was deafening. The guards stepped forward, their postures menacing. Sasha's chest tightened, her breath shallow. This couldn't be happening. I'm calling my father, she said, voice steadier than she felt. She dialed, hands shaking. The manager said nothing. The call connected instantly. Dad, they're kicking me out of the airport, Sasha said, her voice trembling. Stay where you are. I'll handle it, came her father's calm, firm reply. Sasha turned to the agents. My father is on his way. I suggest you think carefully about what you do next. The manager hesitated. Before she could speak, one of the male agents muttered, Daddy's coming to save the day, huh? Sasha's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. She leaned against the wall, her composure intact. Outside, the terminal buzzed with activity, but in that moment, time stood still. Then came the sound of familiar footsteps. Her father appeared, striding toward her with calm authority. The security guards stiffened, their indifference shifting to wary attention. The manager, too, straightened, an uneasy smile tugging at her lips. Sasha stepped away from the wall, feeling the weight lift with her father's presence. His calm authority felt like a shield against the frustration and humiliation she'd been carrying since arriving. Miss Obama, Barak said, his voice steady. Are you all right? Sasha nodded, her voice tight. They were going to kick me out of the airport. Barak turned to the manager, his gaze unwavering. Is that true? The manager hesitated. We had concerns about her behavior. She was becoming disruptive, and we have protocols for this. Disruptive? Barak raised an eyebrow. Explain how my daughter was disruptive. Before the manager could respond, the TSA agent chimed in. That's not true, Sasha interjected, her voice shaking with anger. I complied with everything. You treated me like a criminal, and when I stood up for myself, you called it disruption. The agent remained silent, and the manager visibly shrank under Sasha's words. Barak's expression hardened. There's been a serious misunderstanding. My daughter isn't leaving unless she chooses to. Now, why was she singled out? The manager cleared her throat, struggling. Her ticket was flagged, and we followed up. Flagged for what? Barak's patience was thinning. She had a valid ticket and ID. What prompted this extra scrutiny? The woman faltered. Her face reddened. The male TSA agent, however, crossed his arms and spoke again. Sometimes we have to make judgment calls, especially when something doesn't feel right. Something didn't feel right? Barak repeated, his voice dropping slightly. The weight of his words seemed to press down on the room. You made a judgment call based on how my daughter looks, didn't you? The tension in the corridor was almost suffocating. The female TSA agent glanced nervously at her colleague, who avoided her gaze. I assure you, sir, the manager began, her voice shaking slightly, we don't tolerate discrimination in this airport. No one answered. The silence was deafening, a tacit admission of guilt. Are you ready to go? He asked gently. Sasha nodded, clutching her bag tightly. She was ready to leave this nightmare behind her. But a part of her bristled at the idea of letting these people off the hook. As they turned to leave, the manager stammered, Wait, sir. Perhaps we can discuss this further. Barak paused, his back to the group. When he spoke, his voice was low and steady, but the warning in his tone was unmistakable. You'll be hearing from me, he said. And I suggest you prepare yourselves for a thorough review of your so-called protocols. Without another word, he placed a hand on Sasha's shoulder and guided her back toward the main terminal. The corridor behind them remained unnervingly quiet. As they walked, Sasha felt a mixture of relief and lingering frustration. She glanced at her father, searching his face for some sign of his true emotions, but his expression remained calm, his focus fixed straight ahead. Dad, she began hesitantly, I'm sorry you had to come down here. I didn't know what else to do. Barak stopped and turned to face her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. Sasha, you don't have to apologize for standing up for yourself. What happened here today is unacceptable, and it's not your fault. You did the right thing by calling me. His words soothed some of the tension that had been coiled in her chest, but the sting of the morning's events still lingered. "They treated me like I didn't belong," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "I know," Barak replied, his tone heavy with a mixture of anger and sadness. "And they're going to answer for it." As Barack Obama and his daughter walked back toward the main terminal, the buzz of airport life gradually filled the silence between them. The announcements, hurried footsteps, and the low murmur of conversations seemed jarring after the tense, stifling quiet of the corridor. SASHA glanced at her father, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm of emotions churning within her. She knew him well enough to recognize the sharpness in his otherwise measured stride, the kind of quiet fury he rarely allowed to surface. The weight of the morning pressed down on her, each humiliating moment replaying in her mind. The accusatory questions, the invasive searches, the insinuations that she didn't belong. It was exhausting. And yet, the presence of her father felt like a steady anchor in the chaos. They stopped near a row of chairs in the terminal, just far enough from the security checkpoint to avoid prying eyes, but close enough for Barack's protective instincts to remain on high alert. SASHA sat down, clutching her bag as if it were a lifeline. Her father remained standing, his eyes scanning the area with an air of calm authority. "Dad," she said, her voice soft but strained, "I don't want this to happen to anyone else." Her words hung in the air for a moment before Barack nodded. "It won't," he said firmly. "We'll make sure that—" Just then, a uniformed airline representative approached them, her face a mixture of unease and professional composure. She was flanked by two more staff members, their body language stiff and uncomfortable. The lead representative, a woman with a name tag that read M. Patel, addressed Barack directly. "Mr. Obama," she began, her tone carefully controlled, "on behalf of the airport and our airline, I want to apologize for any inconvenience you and your daughter have experienced this morning." Barack turned to face her fully, his expression unreadable. "Inconvenience," he repeated, his voice calm but with an edge that made the woman visibly shift on her feet. "Is that what you call it?" Patel hesitated, her composure wavering. "I assure you, we take these matters very seriously. I've been informed of the situation and I want you to know that we're looking into it." "Looking into it?" Barack echoed, his tone clipped. "Let me be clear, Miss Patel. My daughter was humiliated, singled out, and treated as though she didn't belong here. That's not an inconvenience. It's discrimination. And if your staff can't tell the difference, then you have a much bigger problem than you realize." SASHA watched the exchange in silence, her emotions a mix of vindication and lingering frustration. Patel's face reddened, and she glanced at her colleagues as if searching for support. "We deeply regret what happened," Patel said, her voice softer now. "If there's anything we can do to make this right—" "There is," Barack interrupted, his voice calm but carrying the weight of undeniable authority. "First, I want the names of every TSA agent and staff member involved in this incident. Second, I expect a full report on your so-called protocols that allowed this to happen in the first place. And third, I want you to ensure that this kind of behavior is not only addressed but eradicated." Patel nodded quickly, pulling a notepad from her pocket. "Of course, Mr. Obama. I'll personally oversee the investigation." "You'll do more than oversee," Barack said. "You'll act. Because if I don't see immediate concrete changes, I'll make sure this incident is brought to the attention of every major news outlet in the country." The threat, though delivered in a measured tone, sent a visible ripple of unease through the group. Patel scribbled furiously in her notepad, nodding all the while as the representative scurried away. Barack turned back to SASHA, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. His touch grounded her. "We're not done here," he said quietly. "But first, let's get you on that flight." The airline's decision to delay the flight for Barack and SASHA caused a stir among the waiting passengers. Whispers spread like wildfire, and several people craned their necks to catch a glimpse of the former president. SASHA, feeling the weight of their stares, kept her gaze down as she followed her father to the gate. The gate agent, a A young man with a nervous smile hurriedly scanned their boarding passes and gestured them through with exaggerated politeness. "Have a great flight, Mr. Obama," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Barack offered a curt nod, his focus unwavering as they walked down the jet bridge. Sasha couldn't help but release a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For the first time that morning, she felt the glimmer of relief. Once they were seated, Barack turned to her, his expression softening. "Are you okay?" he asked. Sasha nodded, though her voice betrayed her lingering unease. "I'm just tired." Barack placed a hand over hers. "I know. But you did the right thing, Sasha. Standing up for yourself, calling me, that takes courage." Her eyes welled up with unshed tears, but she blinked them away. "It shouldn't have to." "No," Barack agreed. "It shouldn't. But until people stop making assumptions based on someone's appearance, we have to keep pushing back." The flight itself was uneventful, but Sasha couldn't shake the heaviness that had settled over her as she stared out the window, the clouds below them stretching endlessly into the horizon. Her mind replayed the morning's events. She thought about the TSA agents, the manager, the smirking guard, people who had likely never stopped to consider the impact of their actions. Her father's voice interrupted her thoughts. "What are you thinking about?" Sasha turned to him, her expression resolute. "How to make sure this never happens again." Barack smiled faintly, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Good, because this fight isn't just about you or me. It's about everyone who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong." His words lingered with her, filling her with a renewed sense of purpose. By the time they landed in New York, Sasha felt more determined than ever to turn this experience into something meaningful. As they exited the plane, Barack's phone buzzed with a message. He read it quickly, his expression darkening slightly. "What is it?" Sasha asked. He held up the screen for her to see. It was an email from Patel detailing the immediate steps the airline and TSA planned to take. But what caught Sasha's attention was the final line. It was a start. The email hung in the air between Sasha and Barack Obama as they walked through the terminal at John F. Kennedy International Airport. The mention of the TSA agents being placed on administrative leave seemed like a small victory, but it wasn't enough to dispel the weight of what had happened. Barack's jaw tightened as he slid his phone back into his pocket, his mind already working through the next steps. For Sasha, however, the morning's events remained a raw wound. The humiliation, the invasive scrutiny, the dismissive attitudes. Each moment lingered in her thoughts like a splinter she couldn't remove. As they exited the airport, the noise of New York City provided little solace. The city's chaos mirrored her internal turmoil. "Dad," Sasha began hesitantly as they slid into the back seat of a waiting car, "do you think anything will actually change?" "I mean, they suspended those agents, but isn't that just damage control?" Barack turned to her, his gaze steady. "You're right to be skeptical," he said. "Suspensions are a start, but they're not enough. Accountability has to go deeper. The systems that allow this kind of behavior need to be dismantled." Sasha nodded, though her frustration still simmered beneath the surface. "I just don't want this to be swept under the rug." "It won't be," Barack assured her. "We'll make sure that—" As the car wound through the busy streets, Barack called his team, his voice calm but urgent. He laid out the details of the incident at Reagan National Airport, making it clear that a strong response was needed. By the time they reached their destination, he had already begun setting his plan in motion. The following morning, the media picked up the story with headlines like, "Sasha Obama targeted in airport discrimination scandal, former president demands accountability for TSA misconduct." A statement from Barack Obama's office called for immediate reforms, highlighting that the incident was part of a larger systemic issue within the TSA. The public reaction was quick and divided. Many supporters expressed their outrage on social media, while some critics accused the Obamas of overreacting. Despite the mixed responses, one thing was undeniable: the incident sparked widespread attention. An internal investigation at the airport was swiftly initiated, uncovering a concerning pattern of bias within the TSA. Whistleblowers came forward, shedding light on discriminatory practices, and the agents involved in Sasha's mistreatment were temporarily suspended. As more information came to light, public pressure intensified. The agents' previous misconduct was exposed, resulting in their dismissal. The incident not only highlighted specific issues within the TSA, but also ignited a broader conversation about systemic discrimination, forcing a reevaluation of security protocols and accountability measures. Barak continued to push for change, meeting with TSA officials to secure commitment for reform. Sasha, now speaking out about her experience, became a powerful voice for justice and equality, with her father by her side, guiding her every step. For Sasha, the changes were a step forward, but she knew the fight was far from over. Her experience at Reagan National Airport had been a painful reminder of the work still to be done, but it also showed her the power of speaking out and standing up for what's right, even when faced with adversity. The morning sun cast a warm glow over Washington, D.C. as Barack Obama sipped his coffee on the balcony. The past weeks had been filled with media frenzy and important meetings, but as he looked over the city, a sense of quiet determination settled in. This wasn't his first fight for change, and it wouldn't be his last. Inside, invited to speak at a national conference on social justice, she was nervous but determined. As she adjusted her blazer in front of the mirror, her father appeared at the door. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. "Nervous," she replied, "but ready." "You've got this," Barak reassured her. "Just speak from the heart. People need to hear your truth." At the conference, a grand hall filled with activists, policymakers, and community leaders waited in silence as Sasha took the stage, feeling the weight of the moment, but drawing strength from her father's steady presence. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "My name is Sasha Obama, and I'm here today to share a story. A story that, unfortunately, is not unique to me." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "A few weeks ago, I was traveling to New York for a conference. What should have been a routine trip turned into an experience of humiliation, bias, and discrimination. I was singled out, scrutinized, and ultimately removed from the airport, not because of anything I did, but because of how I was perceived." Her voice grew stronger as she recounted the events in detail, describing the invasive searches, the dismissive attitudes, and the blatant assumptions made about her. She spoke of the pain and frustration she felt, but also of the resilience and determination that had carried her through. "This isn't just about me," she said, her gaze sweeping across the audience. "It's about every person who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong. It's about a system that allows prejudice to dictate how people are treated, and it's about the change we must demand, together." The room burst into applause as Sasha concluded her speech, her words hitting home with everyone present. She stepped down from the stage, her heart pounding, when she was immediately met by her father. His face beamed with pride, his eyes filled with admiration. "You were amazing," he said, pulling her into a quick, tight hug. That was exactly what they needed to hear. Sasha couldn't help but smile, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. The weight of her message hung in the air, and she could sense that it had truly resonated. But alongside the relief, there was a deeper, more powerful feeling renewed purpose. The path she had chosen wasn't easy, and the fight for justice was far from over. There were still many obstacles to overcome, many battles yet to be fought. Yet, standing there with her father, Sasha knew one thing for sure: she was ready for whatever lay ahead. Her father's words gave Sasha a newfound strength, fueling her determination to keep pushing forward and fight for what was right. The applause may have faded, but the fire inside her burned brighter. She knew this was just the start of her journey, and no matter the challenges ahead, she was ready to face them with courage and conviction. In the weeks that followed, the reforms championed by Barack began to take hold. Mandatory bias training for TSA agents was rolled out nationwide, aiming to challenge stereotypes and foster empathy. An independent oversight committee was formed to investigate complaints and hold employees accountable, while a hotline for reporting discrimination gave passengers a direct way to voice their concerns. Reactions to the changes were mixed. Some saw them as a step toward fairness, while others believed they were unnecessary. Barack, used to opposition, stood firm in his beliefs. Sasha also remained outspoken, sharing stories of those who faced injustice. Her posts and speeches sparked important conversations and inspired many to demand accountability. One day, SASHA received an email from a woman who had traveled through Reagan National Airport after the incident. The woman shared how TSA agents had treated her with kindness and respect, a sharp contrast to her past encounters. "Your story made a difference," the woman wrote. Touched by the message, SASHA forwarded it to her father. He responded simply, "This is why we fight." It was a reminder that even small changes could have a lasting impact, and their efforts were making a difference in the lives of others. As the months passed, the ripple effects spread, sparking reforms at other airports and fueling broader conversations about bias across various sectors. For SASHA, it was a transformative experience, painful but powerful, a lesson in resilience and the importance of speaking out. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. Share this video with your friends to inspire important changes. Be sure to check out our channel for more stories like this. See you in the next episode.